So, the last speaker of today needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway. We've got the Prince of the Provinces, the veteran of vocabulary, the slayer of frogs. We're about to invite the Honourable Shane Jones up, someone who's been out in regional New Zealand, spreading the gospel of growth, speaking to absolutely everyone who now sees hope come to their area. So after so long, he's the only man who's gone out there and actually believed in the ambitions of rural and regional New Zealand. And with the likes of the Fast Track Approvals Bill, the RIF, and many other initiatives, he's out there spreading the gospel of growth. So I'll welcome to the stage Honourable Shane Jones.
You have reached that part of the afternoon where the eyelids are drooping and you're thinking of the bar, especially the further south you come from. Greetings, folks. It's a pleasure to be here and share some thoughts with you. I have to say, first time I have heard our senator from Australia speak, Winston. Initially, when I looked at the program, I was a little too casual. I looked at the name and I said, thank Lord it's spelt with a T and not a bloody D. Obviously, that speaker reminded us that we parties like ourselves, we are facing profound forces moving through Western democracies, where facts are now overwhelmed by feelings. And if you belong to the woke tribe, I'm not allowed to hurt your feelings. And if you don't want to be known as a he or a she, then your feelings trump the foundation influences and values that lie at the heart of a party like ours. I say to them, bugger you. We've also inherited a situation where science, economic rationalism, plays second fiddle to ideology and falsehoods, and nowhere are we seeing it more frequently in New Zealand than the rhetoric, the shrillness around climate alarmism. Look, I know I make a few of you uncomfortable when I say the party that I belong to is called New Zealand First, not Climate First. But I mean it on your behalf. I really do, folks. We've got problems with the cost of living. We've got problems with infrastructure. We've got problems with social security, with crime. And the moment that you talk about a host of other problems and somehow you're not showing enough deference or religious obedience to the climate god, then somehow you are to be cancelled. You're to be written out of the script as a denialist. Unless your nation is generating an economic dividend every single year, we won't have the money to pay for climate change adaptation. So the next time we sing the national anthem, and the lyric, the line, God save New Zealand first, you, me, your neighbour. Let's make sure we've still got a country so God can defend it. look no further than the ideology that we stand against for the cancellation of the Marsden Point refinery. I've spoken to people associated with that decision, both the private sector and people in the public sector. Today, they are still astounded that the Labour government and the Green Klingons willingly applauded the demise of our refinery, thus leaving us grossly vulnerable as a small, open trading nation. Yes, there is a future for Marsden Point Refinery. Number one, it should have its own status. It should, folks, have its own zone because it's important to our military, it's important to our industry, and in no way whatsoever should it ever be dominated by foreign owners again, as is the case with the oil companies who sold us out. They promised back 5, 6 years ago that they were going to create additional storage capacity so we didn't have shortages, we didn't have vulnerabilities for things you and I take for granted, i.e. having enough jet fuel in Auckland. Winston knows this. To this day, they've done nothing. They keep blaming each other, which is why on Monday I am announcing we are passing regulations and we will force them to store the fuel in New Zealand. But sadly, it's not just about Marsden Point. When Jacinda cancelled the oil and gas industry, and sure, I get made fun of because I was the guy with the kabuki faces going, oh my. You can imagine what was going on in my head. So I am on your behalf doing a form of penance when we reopen the oil and gas industry in New Zealand to ensure that the lights don't go out and we don't just rely on Indonesian coal. But underlying that ideology was a belief that by cancelling an industry based on an indigenous resource called natural gas, which, by the way, we've got inordinate amounts down off the coast of Canterbury. We have huge amounts off the coast of the east, around Gisborne, Wairarapa. And we have residual amounts in Taranaki. But it was driven by a belief that if they cancelled that industry in New Zealand, then we as Kiwis would lead the world and prevent the planet from heating. The conceit and the arrogance of the Labour Party and the Green Party, because they continue to believe that. Whilst at the same time, they go to all these climate conferences. How do they get there? I can tell you with that, they're not going on one of the original 7 wakas that came from Hawaii. And why do they wait until they get to international airports and then put on TikTok or Twitter how they're lamenting the demise of the planet? That level of hypocrisy, please, fellow New Zealand First members, don't buy into it. Stand against it and send it to the bloody knackers yard. Today we had the economists talk to us. Indeed, I think it was our conference in Christchurch. Cameron's father, if I'm not mistaken, Winston, was a guest of honour. There's one thing that he said which lies at the heart of the economic narrative that is at the pith of our party. Before you argue about redistributing wealth or carving up the pie, focus on the generation of the wealth. Make the wealth before you bicker as to how you're going to divide it or spend it. So what have we done to aid the process of making wealth. The first thing that went into our coalition agreement on your behalf was the fast-track legislation. What lies at the heart of that? It's a sense of deep frustration and, quite frankly, cynicism that local government, regional government, Department of Conservation, and these other characters have slowed everything down. It's virtually impossible to get large projects in New Zealand completed either in time or within the cost parameters. With the passage of the fast-track legislation, we are going to accelerate development in New Zealand, mark my words. This doesn't mean that we're going to trash the environment. I mean, it's a low blow for my combatants in the Green movement to say that about me. And look, I know a number of you figuratively kicked me in the shin when I said, if there is a mining opportunity and a blind frog is in the way, hide it, Freddie. I didn't mean on your behalf we were going to commit species extinction. I just meant that Freddie was in the departure lounge. And I only say that, admittedly, with a bit of humour. Folks, we've got to have trade-offs. We must have trade-offs, and we need to make those trade-offs on the basis of science, economic rationalism, and open debate. Not tiny groups able to weaponise the Resource Management Act, not tiny groups able to weaponise discussions, debates either around wāhi tapu or species, but an open, honest discussion. How are we going to grow ourselves out of the doldrums that this government found ourselves to be in when we took over the benches of Treasury? Because we have huge and dire challenges in front of us, not the least of which is a $13 billion deficit, which was just referred to the other day. And the only way you and I are going to get out of it is not continually cutting. We have to grow. And we are not going to grow if we continually overstate risks and understate costs. We're not going to grow unless there are politicians and parties with a clear manifesto and a mandate to go for growth. Why are the roads that we build in New Zealand the most expensive? Why is energy during this winter the most expensive in the Western world? Our energy system is broken. We have allowed the gentailers, the large energy companies, to rake in inordinate profits whilst the exporters are going broke. I hope you heard The Economist warning us, when your energy system has a reputation in tatters, no one is going to continue operating in New Zealand, or fresh investors come to work with New Zealanders if they cannot enjoy our historic advantage of cheap and affordable energy. And on your behalf, I will soon be announcing that not only are we going to turbocharge the capacity of Marsden Point, but we are going to find the money to go to a new frontier of development and use the geothermal energy in our country to ensure that the cost of energy sinks to a low level that you and I can afford as Kiwis. One thing more nauseating than me seeing the Green people overseas lecturing me about the death of the planet because of Matua Shane's rhetoric is Debbie Ngarewa Peka, on behalf of the Māori Party, trotting off overseas and dissing the nation that we belong to. I don't mind debating ideas as a parliamentarian. I love the contest of ideologies, of philosophies, but the notion that the Māori Party are raising a new generation of young men and women to not feel pride either in our flag, our name, or indeed not have confidence about our future means they need to be driven out of Parliament sooner rather than later. You have heard Winston talk about the hypocrisy of that small group distorting the ambitions of all the iwi in the country. As you know, I'm the guy who said, put the K back in iwi. And if you have any doubts, it's a measure of immense frustration to watch them come into Parliament, swagger, behave in a manner totally inconsistent with the traditions of Parliament, take all the upside but accept none of the obligations. It's not only misleading a new generation, but it is selling Māori ambition as a contribution to a greater, more prosperous New Zealand dangerously short. The co-leaders have sadly not only misrepresented, but they've sold their own people out. They thought that they would have a clean, unfettered, non-contested journey into some new Hawaii future, where you can have all the rights and none of the obligations, until Winston and I stood up in Parliament. And they know every day they do not get a free pass from us. None of this business of turning up. None of this business of turning up, using trash-talking language, and then complaining, oh, you're victimizing us, when one co-leader is told, are you the Lone Ranger or Tonto with that hat on? And the other leader is told by me on Facebook on your behalf a day or two ago, if you want to be an activist, and by your own admission, you want to take off your portai, your hat of being a parliamentarian, and fight the fast track in a very vicious way, then be an activist, but for God's sake, leave politics permanently, because we've had a guts full of you. Now look, this is a speech that's got a fair degree of rhetoric in it. But underlying this speech, when I talk about green ideology or the Māori Party, are some cardinal ideas. One is the idea, in terms of the Māori Party, of an indivisible citizenship. You cannot dismember, you cannot pull apart the Treaty of Waitangi in some faddish, Vogue-like way just to suit an untested ideology and pretend that somehow you have a superior moral view about the future of New Zealand's race relations. Their new insult to Winston and I is Momo to toto Māori. That means your Māori blood is wasted. Not only have I shot back at them, but know this from me, I know their genealogy better than they do. I know the story of Titoko Waru. I know the story of the East Coast, and I can hit you with the left hand and the right hand in either language, so be careful what you ask for. The media are here. The media realize that our government is doing tremendously well as we take on some deep challenges. They also realize that we are three parties that have found common ground on your behalf. And we've got the maturity to sort out what differences there may be from time to time in a professional manner, in such a way it doesn't spill out and become fuel for a media that is always looking for gotcha moments. This particular government, with our Deputy Prime Minister, is working extraordinarily well in trying to strike the balance How are we going to grow the economy whilst at the same time trim the sails of the state, which you and I have to agree got totally out of control after COVID? But that's not the only thing that got out of control. What was really trounced were your liberties, your rights, and our protections as citizens under the nation state of New Zealand. And I know it may sound a bit pointy-headed to use those sorts of words, but nothing motivates me more as a politician than ensuring that the autocracy, the spread of the state, is constantly challenged, which is why I'm solidly on side with the kaupapa, the mission that David Seymour is endeavouring to bring forward in relation to plucking out excessive regulation. We have to be eternally vigilant. We have to be awkward in what we say, because the bureaucracy at the end of the day demonstrated during COVID, if it's not controlled or curbed, it will cripple us. Tomorrow, Winston will be giving his address. Please remember, for 3 years, we were given an unwanted sabbatical. We put a lot of homework, not only in what the board said about fundraising, but we put a lot of homework into ensuring the ideas we brought forward were capable of being implemented and turned into robust action, so we have something to justify the confidence and the trust of our fellow Kiwis who have sent us back to be at the centre of the government. Number one, delivery. That's right. Number two, action. That's right. And the most important thing is sustaining momentum so people continue to believe that New Zealand First not only can curb the excesses of its fellow travellers, but is never going to bow down and be cancelled or censored for having feelings, attitudes, objectives, goals, opinions, and aims that do not suit the elite, media-orientated, woke, green-riddled munchkins. And whether they've got a moko or not, they've met their match in Winston and me. Thank you very much.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that fantastic speech by the Honourable Shane Jones brings the end to day one of our convention. So just another round of applause, team. So what we've